Oh, I thought that. Yeah, yeah. What do I know? Okay. I hate standing. I like moving around, but I'm going to have to do it today. But I'm not going to go very long. Really, I'm just going to kind of introduce this concept a little bit, and then let some other people get more into the weeds. Has anyone ever, I mean, I know men are like this. What does it mean when your wife says, "Oh yeah, you can go out with your friends tonight, but don't get drunk"? That means you've gotten drunk before, right? So this is what Langdon tells me as he says, "Don't be boring." I think he was telling me I'm boring sometimes. So, I tell people, I work with the trend hunter people sometimes and the spigot people, and I say, the really unfortunate thing is with every good meal, someone has to eat vegetables. And so the association is a little bit like the eating vegetables thing, but we're getting partners who bring the dessert and all this kind of stuff. So now you get to be exposed a little bit to the vegetables, and I'm sorry, but I'll try to make it as interesting as I can. About us, for those of you that didn't dig very deeply into it, we are about 3,000 members now. We've doubled in size every year for the 5.5 years that we've been in existence. We were initially formed specifically for a couple of reasons. One, we saw that there was a lack of any efforts to professionalize innovation. And we felt like if you don't professionalize something, then it doesn't go anywhere. Interesting enough, ISO 56000 was also, ISO formed this group the same year that we formed. So somebody at ISO saw the same thing that we were talking about when we did it. Doubling in size every year. It's just been a really amazing, fun story to be working on this thing. And we've got some great people like Langdon and some of the other folks here that are around. Now, I messed this one up. That's supposed to say 56,000. I just realized it. So what we have with the ISO 56000, and Tom Brazil, who's here somewhere, mentioned this last night, and I think he nailed it. He said, how do I bring someone in off the street, and I know that they know innovation? So as all of our companies are trying to build in more competency in innovation and trying to build teams and build organizations that basically are full of innovators and full of people with ideas, what do they need to know? And what we've got is you go from one company to another company right now, and their idea of innovation and how to approach innovation, how to manage innovation is just vastly different. So how do you create a profession, without some rules? Now, my first career was as an accountant, so, how much more rules-based can you get than that? And then we had, ISO 9000, and look at the impact that ISO 9000 has had on not every company, mostly manufacturers, but when you talk about something like 56,000, now you're talking about potentially every company could be looking at these rules. And I think it's really important when you start looking at open innovation partners. So we're going to develop something in an open innovation environment, but we're not on the same page. We don't have the same vocabulary, we don't have the same processes, we don't have the same rules around innovation. And this is the thing that's going to be game-changing and what's so exciting about ISO 279. It might sound boring to a lot of you. It sounds boring to a lot of people. But it's going to change everything. It's going to shake it up. And obviously, if you know it, if you're ahead of it before someone else, then you're in a better position. So ISO, as most of you know, does anybody not know ISO? Okay, everybody knows ISO. Non-governmental organization. It's in 164 countries. It's voluntary. Everybody that does it is a volunteer. Everyone who participates in our group is a volunteer. We have to pay them to volunteer. It's a great model. So therefore, the way it works is ISO has a representing organization in each country. In the United States, it's ANSI, American National Standards Institute, and then we're an agent that tries to bring in all the ideas for innovation. We walk basically right through ANSI up to ISO. But ANSI, I got to fill out an annual report sometime before the 31st, so they make my life really fun. By the way, I am the secretariat for the U.S. tag. The chair and the vice chair, it's a funny story. The vice chair was going to be here, and then the chair, and then he got basically a consulting gig that he just couldn't turn down. And the chair says, no problem, I can take care of everything. And then he got a detached retina, so he's not here either. But it happens, just like the weather and government shutdowns, and you just got to go with the flow, right? We're all innovators, so we just do what we need to do. It's basically, they call it the management system standard as a broad picture. It's how do we manage innovation. It provides recommendations and requirements for organizations and processes. We've seen, like in government contracting and stuff, what ISO 9000 has done. You need to be accredited ISO 9000 to bid for this project, period. This may be where we get with 56,000 someday. But, you know, the benefits you get out of is more efficient resource use, improved risk management, increased customer satisfaction, services and products consistently delivered. So we become better at innovation as innovation becomes more of a rote process. And everyone's going to have to be innovating. I think we can see that just with the people we've already heard from. If you're not innovating, you're not going to be around very long. And this is one of our greatest struggles with the association, is we have to work in an organization like ISO. And what drives me crazy is they have things like we have to do a vote, and you have to do the vote on their form, in paper, their format. And it's like, wow, this is crazy. You can't even do it. But Eduardo's developing something for ISO nationally from us, or internationally from us, to capture the votes electronically. Hard to imagine that ISO does not capture votes electronically, but they do it on PDFs. So this is what we're kind of having fun with right now. It was created, like I said, in 2013. OECD works with it. The Oslo Manual, if anybody's seen that, was kind of the precursor to this thing. I hate to tell, we're predominantly from the US here. However, Europe has taken the charge in this thing. You know, for the country that, and I say this tongue-in-cheek, that invented innovation, or at least the modern innovation as we see it, we don't have enough people there. We have 30 people in the technical advisory group right now. But we only got into it last May, so we're still working on it. We're doing a pretty good job. The World Trade Organization, the World Bank, we've got a lot of partners in there. That picture at the bottom was, I believe, from Madrid. So you see we get a whole ton of people in a room, and everybody, it's very like United Nations-like. It's kind of cool. Everybody votes, and you've got delegates and secretariats, and it makes me feel important, but really all I do is push the paper right now. The mission, the innovation management objectives, missions, and organizations. So who's really concerned about this, and this list is not exhaustive, but industry and commerce, especially small and medium enterprises. So think about this open innovation platform. I could see a large company, we've got Fran B in here from Corning, that Corning says, we want to innovate with our partners, and here's a bunch of suppliers and development partners and stuff. Well, you guys all need to be accredited. So I don't necessarily see that the largest organizations may be required to be accredited, but their partners probably will be, to be a part of the team. Governments and public investment bodies, let's face it, the government asks for people to be accredited in things they understand because it puts everybody on a level playing field. And I have had conversations over here with members of Congress and stuff saying, you know, at some point when you require innovation in your RFPs, requests for proposals and stuff, at some point you're going to say you need to be ISO accredited, you need to be IOIP certified, or we won't even consider you, because at least it puts everybody on the same playing field. Otherwise you get all these people go, oh yeah, we're innovative, we're such great innovators. What does that mean? Everybody's a great innovator if you catch them in the hallway, right? Academic and research organizations, so we can start actually developing research around innovation, which you can't do unless you've got some standardization. NGOs, I don't know exactly what I'd use for an example for that. Liaisons with OECD, the Oslo Manual, and the International Patent Organization. Huge piece of this, and one of the reasons we were really pushed into this is because, and this is not meant to be a derogatory statement in any way, but China is sending 30 people just to the IP committee. and they're really pushing their agenda on the intellectual property. So the United States asked us to go ahead and step up and start trying to represent intellectual property from the United States perspective. So what we're doing is important work. Just to give you an idea of kind of the overview of it, there's only 4 working groups now. There's a 5th one in the process of being formed, but let's only talk about the ones here. The first one, which was voted on and passed, but has not been made official or announced yet. I guess you guys don't tell anybody I announced it. But it passed in December, was the 50501, the Innovation Management Systems. Argentina ran that one, and it's going to be out there probably, if anybody's got any ideas, we can always send some of the team out to do workshops and stuff as these roll out. So, Soren's over here. He knows a lot about this stuff. So there's an opportunity to go out there, do workshops, and work it out. Very important, and there's a lot of the IOIP in here, is the terminology working group. We had, as part of our certification exam, we had how many terms and definitions do you think there are in there? Probably in ours. So we've got several hundred terms and definitions on innovation. We donated it to the ISO group. And so they've incorporated a lot of what we did. This is kind of how it works, is people bring stuff in, they get voted on. What we'll do then is they modify the terms and terminologies to be more consistent with ISO. We'll pull it back in so that if you get a certification from the IOIP, then you have the terms and terminologies that's built into ISO. Strategically, this was something we needed to do, and we feel proud that we're doing it. The tools and methods, Canada's basically charging that one. Innovation partnerships, strategic intelligence, intellectual property management, and there will be more tools as they come out into these other subgroups. And then assessments. If anybody's ever worked with one of our partners, Innovation 360 Group, they're really pushing their assessment, the science behind their assessments. But if you're doing assessments, you should be also there talking about other things that need to be considered outside of, a few people. Let's face it, if you're there and you're talking about your methodology, people are going to hear you. If you're not there and you're not talking about it, you're going to get left behind. You may have a Betamax, and the VHS will beat you because they showed up. Everybody knows the Betamax VHS thing. That's old stuff. There we go. I'm in the back there. You can barely see me, but they always stick the tall people in the back, and then you're just a floating head. That was in Madrid last spring. And I'm ahead of time, so I can actually take some questions. But, no question. I can't answer any questions. You'll have to find me later. I'll just put us ahead of schedule. That never happens at conferences, by the way. You're going to get more details from some of the working group people and stuff here. Like I said, I'm just the secretariat, so I push the paper around and go to some of the meetings and stuff and represent us. If you're interested in finding out what it takes to become a TAG member, I will tell you that the best thing of being part of the ISO TAG is you get to go to the ISO meetings twice a year, and they only hold them in really cool places. Last year was Paris and London, Madrid, Tokyo. Yeah, so in the last 2 years have been Paris, Madrid, Tokyo, and London. And then they treat you really well. When we were in Madrid, we got to have dinner at the mayor's mansion with the mayor. So they treat you like an international delegation. It's really cool. You get treated well, you eat well, you sit through 6 hours of really boring meetings during the day, but it makes it all worth it. So capture Frank Vole there if you're interested. I got to talk to Frank about getting rid of his AOL account because that just really dates somebody. I'm sorry for anyone who's still using AOL. I'm sorry. But that's it. So who do we have next? You transitioning or? Okay, Abe Walton's coming up. Abe was member number two at the association. He knows more about the association than I do, and has been the chief operating officer. I think he's the chief operating officer again. He's a professor, tenured at Florida Institute of Technology, so he's got an impressive resume.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
It's an honor to be here. Langdon, will the next deck load by itself? All right, I'll wait for it to show up, but while it does, it's an honor and pleasure to be here. Here comes the deck now. Again, my name is Walton. This has been a long journey for Brett and me. It goes back maybe over a decade, 2007-8. We've found the need or the lack in the marketplace for an approach to innovation that was scientific. Like you said, you meet anybody in the hallway and they will say, well, I'm an innovator, and usually when you ask them why, it's because they invented something and they have a patent, and that's cute, because 99.3% of patents are non-products. That's the USPTO's own statistic. So when we look at things that are innovative, we have to use the word value for that in somewhere in the definition. And so 2007, 2008, we founded the International Journal of Innovation Science, and through that long history of building a world-class journal, a highly indexed journal, it's in 15,000 libraries around the world, we continue to get contacted by companies saying, hey, this is great stuff that's in your journal, but how do I know who I hire knows anything about innovation, that it's very expensive to hire people because typically these are at the higher levels, or at least the middle to higher levels within a company, and so they're very expensive and the cost of turnover is really high when you think about bringing someone in who spends a year or two purporting to be an innovator and they just implode things and spend a lot of money on R&D and really nothing goes well. So 2013 we founded IAOIP, and ISO launched its investigatory committee into innovation management as a system. And so I'm going to give you, unfortunately, as Brett would say, the vegetables here, so bear with me. I got the short stick, right? So since I have the long tenure of having been in the organization for a while, I guess I'm kind of the historian here. So, all right, it's working. So we have basically a bunch of things have come together, hence you see the funnel, that the innovation management system was built on other preceding ISO frameworks, such as the standards frameworks, how they go about building frameworks and standards and guidelines, and how something will move from an industry need into a report, and then a guideline, then a recommendation, then a standard, and so on. What we've found over the years, when you go back in like 1987 or so, when ISO 9000 was launched, was that in most of the management standards or the management systems, now there's many ISO frameworks, but those that you would consider maybe a management system, an output of that or an outcome were these set of measures, and they looked at, well, how within the ISO 9000 or 14000 or others are they innovating, and what are the methods and measures by which we determine those to be successful. And so we sort of, I'm giving you the really short version, so for the even older historians in the room, pardon my truncation of the facts here, but what we ended up with was this ISO manual that's now in its fourth edition, and I'll show you in a minute kind of how that framework hangs together. So fast forward then, 2013, we weren't even at 56,000. We were at really some guiding documents that just in Tokyo this last year was voted on, turning it into its own family of standards. And so we ended up with an ongoing continual validation of industry's needs, saying we need to know what exactly goes into innovation, because when you think about a field of science, when we set out to build the journal a decade ago, if you go back to your 7th grade high school or middle school class, you'll think about, okay, what goes into a science? Well, you have to have standard methods, standard procedures, all these variables, and they're defined, and so that when we're having a conversation, we all know what we're talking about. We're on the same playbook. So the resultant outcome was innovation management system. And so when we look at the larger framework of things, you see that the Oslo manual is the overarching sort of framework that went from standard to standard. So here on the left-hand side of the screen, you can kind of see some of the basic structures that go into any ISO framework. So you would typically have the system of question, whether it's ISO 9000 for quality or 14 for environment. And then above that, you have some standard language, whether it be the terms and definitions, and then above that you have the core structure and frameworks of how that's going to be carried out, and then eventually you have some audit of the system. So whatever the system audit's going to be with regard to, in this case, any of the standards. So here you have ISO 9000. Now you'll notice that most of the working group, the management standards started out as a substandard, typically from another country. So for instance, when we look at ISO 14000, it really was an initial standard started from the British standards and as a sub of ISO 9000. So again, I'm truncating the history here, but what you'll see then is that with the Oslo manual, we found the innovation measurements were carried across all of the frameworks. We were looking at outcome measures and success measures across all the frameworks. So that kind of begs the question then, well, was there a need for a specific innovation management system? Because innovation management systems have to be then integrated with other management systems. Right? So you have a quality management system, you have an environmental management system, and you have others. So how do these all play together? And then the process that we have to then go through is look at innovation management with the same sort of framework that ISO by and large, has given us to analyze any system and to give us, or yield a really positive outcome that can be carried across companies. So this is a brief history. Brett gave a great backdrop of it. 2018 in October in Tokyo, the standards started, we call them dropped, or they started to be voted on, and so they're not publicly released yet, and so we sort of, I guess, have access to them, but they're not, I guess, in their final review. Working Group 2 is your terminology definition. So this is sort of the breakout of the actual working groups. Working Group 3, which is the one I'm co-chairing, it has four subcommittees, and you can see them there. One of them is intellectual property, as Brett alluded to. China's putting 30 people on that, and so when we were approached to sort of be the voice for the U.S., at least this chapter of IAIP to ISO, we are going to address those four main things. So intellectual property, innovation partnerships, idea management, and strategic intelligence management. So those are the four substructures that are important that they want to look at within the actual frameworks that make innovation work. So number 1 and number 2 are pretty much standard for any ISO framework, right? Everybody's going to have, well, what is the discussion of the system? Number 2 is, what are the terms and definitions? And like Brett mentioned, we gave all of ours from our Global Innovation Science Handbook that was published in 2000 and what was it, Brett, 9, 10? I forget. Anyway, it won a PROS award in 12, I think. So we took those and we fed them to ISO. And so we continue to have this back and forth so that we have a voice for the U.S. on guiding where innovation should be as a standard. So again, so you're having conversations, if you know what you're investing in, if you're bringing partners in, if you're hiring people, that you have a structure to gauge and analyze whether or not this person knows what they're talking about. Because we've all met 1,000 people that claim to be innovators, and it's like, well, that's cute. How really good are you at that? How much do you know about that? So then for Working Group 4, this is the actual assessment audits. So in this case, we're going to take the Oslo manual, which has a lot of outcome measures and assessment methodologies for innovation, and now apply it directly to an innovation management system. So we're going to obviously borrow a lot from the Oslo manual. It's already in there. It's got the 4 major definitions of innovation, for instance. It's got innovation by itself. It's got innovation for processes, services, and products. And so you can borrow from that already a great deal of structure when you're communicating to your clients what the world platform looks at and what they call innovation. So just like when you think about Project Management Institute or other certification bodies like that, when the government says you're going to reply to an RFP and we need to make sure that you're successful, we want a project manager on your team. Oh, and by the way that we know that that is a qualified project manager is that they have a PMI certificate, right? They have their PMP. So our sort of goal and the response to the industry need was to set out in building something similar. So when people say, I need an innovator, I need someone who can communicate to a growth board, I need someone who can do a market analysis, I need someone to figure out whether or not this is a patentable thing and what the web of patents should look like and do an analysis and things like that. These folks have at least a foundational understanding of what cuts across the entirety of a system. Now, they're not going to be experts in all of it, just like, no offense to any PMPers in here, but I've met plenty of PMP people who could just make quite a mess of a project, right? So what that really says is that you're able to take a test with basic understanding, and that if you were put in a situation, that you'd probably come out doing well. It's not necessarily a vouching for your overall ability to lead a program. But with an IAIP, what Darrel's going to lead to next is how the journal led to the association, which led to a relationship to ISO, and then the structure for our certificates. And you'll see how you can actually determine whether or not someone has continued to enhance or level up their ability to be an innovation professional. So then you should ask the question, if you have an innovation management system, what are the structures of that? What are some of the attributes? How would you define or describe an innovation management system? So the first one is strategic direction. So you look at the direction and you go, how is this management system being aligned with other management systems? Conceptually, your company already has a mission, vision, value that it has posted on its website, that it hopefully is being communicated to your leaders and its staff, and you're moving forward in that direction. So this needs to be integrated. It shouldn't be separate from. You shouldn't be isolating your innovation things and saying, well, over here in our innovation group, which a lot of companies do, they set it aside because they want to do greenfield innovation, and they just do stuff that's not necessarily corollary to their overall strategic direction. I can't even read that, it's so small. They must have shrunk this. The next one is exploiting insights. And so that is, when we think about exploiting insights within the innovation context, probably most of us in this room understand what it means to be inquisitive and to look for those insights. But also, because this is an innovation management system that is to be integrated with other management systems, then conceptually you should be looking for exploiting insights from those other systems. What is it in your quality system? What is it in your auditing system? What is it in your environmental system that you're already dealing with your customers on that would allow for you to draw some of the expertise into your innovation teams. And so they're not just standalone things. I'll have to read this to you as well. So the next one's culture. I think it's pretty obvious when we'll talk about that, but what is it in your company that you're doing specifically to embrace and or create a culture that allows people to be innovative? I think it was a great presentation earlier that we saw on the swarm vision, where you were able to see the types of different people that you need to bring on a team. And the traditional business model is that, I think the highest score was optimizers, right? These people are just optimizing things. It's a different mindset. It's a different culture. It's a different way of asking questions. And so if you get stuck, if your culture is such that you are an optimization culture, you're not going to be capitalizing upon things that would yield the next great thing. Then you have managing uncertainty. This is probably one of the most difficult ones for firms to be able to deal with, because no one really wants to go into a company and say, let's just take a bunch of risk. Right? If you think about management's number one job is to reduce risk and reduce variability, which increases the likelihood of predictability. I mean, that's a Deming thing, right? So all of this framework is built on the PDCA cycle, just like the rest of the ISO frameworks. And so it carries with it a lot of that sort of mentality. But the only way you can really become good at minimizing risk is find yourself in a risky situation and then mitigate it well enough that you succeed. It's the same way that you become capable or competent in dealing with ambiguity. How do you increase your capability with ambiguity, which is what the culture here in an innovation management system purports to enable your people to do? You become more capable in ambiguity by being in an ambiguous situation and succeeding. If you fail in an ambiguous situation, then you're gun shy and you don't want to do it again, right? So what's the kind of environment that you can create for a company to be able to enable your people to have a culture that manages uncertainty well? Future-focused leaders, I think, is a pretty straightforward one. These are people who are, as a lot of the talks today and tomorrow we'll be talking about, is having an eye on what's coming down. I think Langdon opened with a great one, you know, if you're not scared, then you're not paying attention. Is that how it was? So they're clearly, most of you here today are looking at our future-focused leaders. A systems approach, I think, borrows heavily from, you know, Deming, Schuart, Duran, Peter Senge, those kind of works about being a systems thinker and understanding how, and particularly how this innovation management system is going to be woven into your overall management systems at large. We have adaptability. Again, I apologize for the miniaturization of those words. Adaptability, and last, the realization of value. And so this is where firms really have borrowed from the Oslo manual and many other, I guess, measurement and assessment constructs to be able to determine if we're putting all this money into innovation, what really are we yielding for our stakeholders? Is it the number of new ideas? Is it the number of patents? Is it the number of licensed products and services? How do we really measure that? And there are leading edge indicators and there are trailing edge indicators. In some companies, because of maybe the manager that's in charge of it, they pick the flavor that they like or that tells the story they want to tell, right? Like maybe a trailing edge indicator of patents or disclosures or things like that. Well, that's not very indicative of what's going into the funnel. So when you think about an innovation funnel, you have activities and resources and inputs. Think Lean Six Sigma, like a SIPOC, right? What's the inputs going into this innovation system, and what are the outputs, and what are your customers caring about that? So this kind of, at a high level, describes the 8 major functions of an innovation management system. So then we kind of have this juxtaposition of maturity levels. Now, I've built and published maturity models that are very scientific. This one's not one of them. We just polled a couple people that are sort of in this world with us, and we said, okay, if you were to describe these system abilities at a very high level or world-class, if you were to describe a company that had a world-class version of it versus, you know, some copycat, what would some of those words be? So when you look at the first system attribute, strategic direction, you have these paradigm-shifting, true north type companies where they really know where they're going, as opposed to these rudderless, indecisive firms. And so I'm going to kind of just go quickly through these, and you can see how they come across, and you can snap a picture at the end. I notice you guys are maybe wanting that, so I'll put them all up there so you can read them. So there's the last one. So realization of value, consistent, grand slam, as opposed to wasteful, black hole, sort of you just pouring money in and hoping and wishing that you actually get some benefit out of the backside of that. So that's kind of a neat way when we talk with firms, you know, where do you feel like you're on there? And there are maturity models that you can give people for self-reporting and determine, and I think Darrel's going to talk about next, you know, knowledge, skills, abilities, competencies, and how people can actually know what are the taxonomical sort of measures to say whether or not you're an innovator. It's cute that you have a patent. No offense to anybody with a patent. It's cute that you think you're an innovator or you were on our team once, but how do we actually know what's going into the system so that we can increase our yields on the other end? So how do we tie it all to the Plan, Do, Check, Act, or Study Act, so the Schuart cycle, right? So the working groups are all centered around the system as a whole. So then you have working group 2 with terminology and definitions. That feeds into our doing, which are the 4 main subgroups on working group 3. So you have idea management, intellectual property, innovation partnerships, and again, strategic intelligence management. And then when we get around to the other side of the wheel, we're studying it. What are we doing? How are we doing? How well are we doing it? We're using the Oslo manual. And then finally, we have the overall assessments from ISO 56000. So they marry up together. So we end up with, the Oslo manual as guidance. And then eventually, what's going to be output from the committees over the next year or two. So what we understand, at least for now, the tentative schedule is that this year we should see most of the the guidelines come down and be voted on over the next several cycles. We expect working group 3, which are the ones here on your right-hand side, those 4 gears, are going to be sort of voted on and set over 2020, 2021, probably the latest 2021, maybe finally published in 2022 is where we see. And again, those are the how-tos. Those are the structures of the innovation management system, the how you do it, how you execute. And so, what would be good or best practices for innovation management for idea management. And we published papers on idea management. We published papers on intellectual property. In fact, we just wrote the epilogue for, open innovation as it relates to IP. So with that, I think I have 4 minutes left. So I'm going to hand that off to, do you want to do it, Langdon, or I'll introduce Darrel, Dr. Darrel Sandall? Okay, take it away.
So, first of all, thank you. Abe made those vegetables taste pretty good, right? Yeah, so I want to make a couple connections that I thought maybe Brett and Abe would mention, but they didn't, so I think it's just important to... I know, but they're important. I mean, your body needs them. So number one, this, as far as we know, is the first public introduction of the new ISO standard. So you're like on the in crowd now. You're part of the cool kids, just like in Gil and Tom's presentations. So number two, I want to make a connection between what Gil and Tom presented and what Brett and Abe and Darrel are about to present. Because I think it's really important, and I think it's implicit, but I want to make it explicit. So, what Gil and Tom showed us were a lot of inspiring ideas created by, brilliant people. But what's behind that? Well, in the corporate environment or the institutional environment, there's an organization behind it. So you can have really smart people doing really cool stuff, but unless that's organized and harnessed in an organizational setting, then the organizations will die. So you've seen the mortality figures on corporations, right? The S&P 500 average lifespan is down from 40 or 50 years down to about 15 years. That's because corporations can't harness the innovative and creative power of their people effectively. Aaron's going to talk about this tomorrow. That's his thing. So the whole purpose of ISO 56000 as a global innovation management standard is to enable organizations, not only large organizations, but definitely large organizations, to harness innovation in a systemic and systematic way so that they can keep up with change. Because otherwise the mortality rate of large organizations is just going to get shorter and shorter, right? So companies are going to be churning faster and faster. And in some ways that's okay, but when you're in a company that gets churned out of business, it's really disruptive, and it can be very painful and very difficult and very expensive economically and financially. So the whole goal of this is to help us to understand how to make the connection between cool ideas, creative people, and we have an innovation management system that actually can deliver innovation in organizations like, remember the first thing I talked about this morning? Chief of Naval Operations. So the U.S. military, one of the largest organizations in the world, recognizes we need to be more innovative. Right? Well, this is the kind of tools and methodologies and frameworks that at the high level will enable them to understand those problems in a way that makes that possible. So that's the connection that I want to make. Darrel, come on up. So Darrel's got the next piece of the puzzle. If you didn't look at the schedule, there's 4 or 5 other pieces of ISO which are going to be presentations delivered up here, either before lunch or after lunch, so that you understand the framework. And again, it's a world premiere. So Darrel is a colleague of Abe's at Florida Institute of Technology. Thanks for doing it.
Okay, good morning. My part is still vegetables, but mine are the better vegetables, I believe. So what I'm going to be talking about a little bit is how the whole ISO 56000 and what IOIP has been doing in certification, in innovation, works together with universities. Just, I'm curious, I want a show of hands if I could, please. How many people are here from universities? Okay, leave your hands up. How many people here depend upon universities to provide employees that you would then hire in your companies? So all of us, right, depend on the universities. Now the thing is, and typically universities are a very stoic model, if you will, and so we are trying to disrupt that a little bit in some of the things that we're doing. So I'm going to talk today about that. There we go. Okay. So what I'm showing you here is a little bit about IOIP's certification program. And I want to give this to you as a background so you understand a little bit about how it's being applied. The pyramid, the idea of the pyramid is there is a base foundation that undergirds all the knowledge and all the experience, the practices that go on. And so I'm going to talk specifically first about the black areas, the text that's in black in that pyramid, and then I will address the areas in yellow as well. So IOIP, through the Global Innovation Science Handbook that was mentioned a little bit ago, through working with hundreds of innovators worldwide, developed a body of knowledge. And that body of knowledge was codified in the GISH handbook, as we call it, the Global Innovation Science Handbook. And that became the basis upon which we created certifications to certify people in areas of innovation. The first two that are at the foundational levels there in black, the CPI, the Certified Professional Innovator, is a practitioner-based certification, essentially providing knowledge, understanding, and through the certification process, ensuring that the people have those fundamentals that they need to innovate. On the other side, the right-hand side of that pyramid, then, the CMI, the Certified Management of Innovation, is the foundation for people who are managing innovation, that are not necessarily in the trenches doing it, but that are managing the people that are. So those serve as the foundation. Now, upon those then are built other certifications. So upon CPI are the design thinking, and then the methods and tools certifications. And these exist today. These are ones that we are giving out that people are taking the test for right now. And those are practitioner-based certifications. They're designed for people, again, who are doing that, who want to be certified that they have a design thinking skill set and a mindset. On the basis, the foundation of the CMI, the Management of Innovation, is then the CMI CINO, or Chief Innovation Officer certification. And this is for those people at the top of their if you will, C-suite, or that are master innovators, that are leading large groups or large teams of innovators. Now, the ones in yellow are some new things, and this is a public unveiling for a lot of things here today. I'll start at the bottom, the Associate Innovation Practitioner. We've had a lot of people who say, okay, I want to have a certification that shows that I understand innovation, but I'm not really going to be doing it. I'm not necessarily managing it. And so a lot of times executives and companies want to show that they have that foundation. And I'll reference some others. We've been working with Malaysia. We'll be rolling some neat things out with Malaysia in 2019, where we're tying in with an associate innovation profession or practitioner as well. And so there's a lot of people that are looking for that really basic foundation. In the practitioner realm, value creation is another one, another certification. In the management realm, innovation architecture. And then we're also working on a new master innovation practitioner, which is, again, at that near the top of the pyramid, because you're managing large groups of innovators, but it's still a practitioner-based certification. So there's a number of certifications that the association has created already. We have 5 in existence, and then there are others that we're planning. I forgot to mention, in tools and methods, you notice that there's a 2 and a 3. There are 150 identified innovation tools that we've already identified. And so the first tool certification looks at 76 of those. So 2 and 3 are going to be subdivisions and breakouts of that, and then additions of new tools as well. So how does the certification programs of the Association of IOIP relate to ISO? And you've already seen what the working groups are, so that's pretty straightforward, but just as a really quick reminder, 2 being terms and definitions, working group 3 being tools and methods. Those really relate nicely to the CPI, the Certified Professional Innovator, and the Certified Management of Innovation. Working Group 4, which is that the Assessments and Measurements Working Group, fits in that middle section of the pyramid. And then the Working Group 1, which is the Integrated Management System, the overarching system, really goes to that top of that pyramid. And so it fits very nicely in with what the association has been doing there. Now, I mentioned earlier that universities are not always the most innovative, we'll say. Traditional model of a faculty member who has their doctorate degree, teaching young people what they know. And that's not always the best model. And so we're actually disrupting in the university sector by introducing the curricula that tie to these certifications and the knowledge, skills, abilities, competencies that undergird them, and building those into classes that people take in the university so that when they go through a class in innovation management, say, at the end they actually take the certification exam. And so there are universities doing that. We're doing that at the Florida Institute of Technology. There are other universities doing that as well. Now, when universities also get involved in the association, we provide them a lot of other value-maximizing ideas and structures. They get access. Students get access to the International Journal of Innovation Science, the journals that Abe mentioned, as well then as student delegates to IOIP and to other areas. There we go. Okay. Now, in addition to incorporating the certifications and the structure into the academic centers around the country, we also are looking at teaching, or not looking at, we're teaching innovation worldwide. So we have what we typically offer times referred to as boot camps that we offer around the world. Most recently, we did one in the United Arab Emirates back in September. And what these are, well, actually, most recently, we did one here in DC last week. But what these are is they're generally 4-day sessions that teach the content, the materials that are covered in these certification exams, and then people have the opportunity to sit for the exams. And so we do these, as I said, around the world. We also, in 2019, will be doing them in a number of other places. This year, going back to DOE, going to Malaysia, and some others as well, and here in the United States. In addition to doing it in person, we know that traveling is not always beneficial and easy in today's society. We do offer these. We offer 3 of them. We have a online training session, multi-hour training sessions, and those are referenced on the screen that you see behind me. The Management of Innovation Certification, the Certified Professional Innovator, and Design Thinking Practitioner one. And those are available. You see the bit.ly URL in the corner there. If you go to that bit.ly URL, bit.ly/FIT innovation, that will take you to the page where you can see those as well. All of these give you, whether it's an in-person boot camp or whether it's a online training, they all give you the information, the knowledge, the foundation you need to be able to sit for those certification exams. Now, because worldwide, as was mentioned earlier, we aren't just a United States organization and ISO. ISO obviously is not just US, it's worldwide. We're doing a lot in the area of international work with regards to all of our certifications are somewhere in the process, or either in the planning stages or actually in the implementation stages of translating them into other languages. So our study guides that we've created for the certification exams all have been translated into Spanish at this point, Arabic at this point, and we're working on translating the certification exam questions themselves so that there's no language barrier for non-native English speakers to be able to sit for the exams, because we want to make sure that people have the best opportunity on those. We're also looking at other languages, French, Portuguese, some others. Also working with the universities, we encourage student innovation competitions, and they can be something like these poster session that we have going on here while we're here. They can be big innovation challenges where you have groups of individuals working hundreds of hours to solve some challenging problem. And they can also be really simple. One of the things we've done at the Florida Institute of Technology is weekly innovation challenges where students come over their lunch hour, they're put into teams, they solve some sort of an innovation challenge in usually the time they're given is about 35 minutes. And so it's very quick, it's very fun. It's a great recruitment tool for companies that sponsor these things. It's a great way for them to get involved in the students. With them, it helps the university from a recruitment standpoint, from an interest standpoint, and so forth. So there's a lot of opportunity there with innovation as well. Now, one of the things that you typically see in graduate school, and occasionally at good universities you see it in undergrad, are students getting involved in actually doing real projects. And so one of the things that we highly encourage is for the universities to include their students in innovation engagements. So when professors are working with companies, have students go with you and practice those skills that they're learning to actually become innovators in practice and not just in concept. I've mentioned a number of different universities that are involved with the association, and here are some of the logos of those universities. If your university is involved, if the association is a member, and I didn't put you up there, I apologize. Please catch me afterward, and we'll rectify that situation. But York is in Canada. We've got so universities across the country and outside the United States. So again, it's not just a U.S. thing that we're doing here. And just to conclude then, with my little piece of the vegetable soup here, is to say that if you're interested in having a university or your university be involved, talk to Walton, who is just a speaker right before me, Abram Walton. He's in charge of the university systems for the association. If you're interested in anything with regards to certifications, then that would be myself, would be who you talk to. So feel free to catch us at the breaks, before, after, today, tomorrow, at any time. And at that point, I'm going to turn it over to Langdon.